Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and now that my obligatory informative videos are done for the day, you guys know what time it is. It's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community, and numerous people have linked me a video by Jeff Cavalier, aka Athlean-X, aka Curl-Lean-X. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of Speechcraft. Let's talk about this. And normally I give Jeff a hard time on a lot of things, but Jeff also does say a lot of good things too. And I think that we always need to keep up with that balance with people that we critique or criticize. We do need to give credit when they say great things. And then when they pull some BS or they try to sell a scam product or something, we need to call them on that stuff too. And I think that's totally reasonable. People need to remember that. Everybody out there, I don't care who it is, every single fitness YouTuber, every single fitness personality has a mix of good and bad information. And you can't lose sight of that. No matter how much you love or hate that person, you need to acknowledge that they do both. All of us do. So Jeff made a video actually in defense of the bench press, and I'm kind of glad to see that. And the ironic part there is that a lot of people assume that when I defend the bench press, it's because I'm a power lifter. But anyone who really knows my stance knows that I don't like the bench press. I don't particularly enjoy the bench press. I am telling myself I do. Do you know why? Because it's my weakest of my power lifts, and therefore I'm specializing in it right now. But I have repeatedly said that if the bench press got removed from powerlifting and replaced with another lift, I wouldn't lose a single bit of sleep over it. And it's not because the bench press isn't a good hypertrophy exercise. It's because I see it as a bodybuilder hypertrophy exercise, not as a powerlifter exercise. And that's the best way to look at it. The bench press really and truly, in my opinion, is a better size builder than it is a display of strength. And that's really how I feel about it. And that's ironic. And so the thing is, when people from the bodybuilding end or the physique end say things like, well, the bench press sucks for putting on size, it's just for power lifters. As a power lifter, I look at it and go, what do you mean? It's a bodybuilder exercise that power lifters adopted. It's our third lift that really is kind of a bodybuilder exercise. It really is. It's a muscle builder. That's what it's good at. I don't think it's the best display of strength. But the point we get over to is that Jeff actually did defend that. And I think that's a very, very valid point that needs to be made. That, yeah, it does utilize most of the range of motion of the chest, right? It involves real adduction. Because look, that's what you're doing. He demonstrated it very well in the video, showed it, highlighted it. And then he talked about some other lifts and things too, like the deadlift. And we'll get over and talk about that for a moment, because he brought up the point, and people are like, you're going to like this video, and I went to go see why. I make the point all the time that the deadlift is a tremendous back builder. And it actually goes contrary to one of my big rules. What is one of the rules I tell you guys for muscle building purposes, for general size and strength? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get bigger as part of our quest to get stronger, because mass moves mass. I usually tell people that a longer range of motion, the longest effective range of motion, generally produces better hypertrophy, right? Because you usually get more tension on a muscle, more work done in a muscle, and a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. So if we're trying to get strong, we want muscles to get big. And that generally increasing the range of motion, not always, but the majority of the time is going to have a favorable effect on hypertrophy. It's going to have a favorable effect on hypertrophy. Now, strength and things like that, we do need to think about things like strength curves and joint angle specificities. So we have that to think about, but in spite of that, the deadlift, which is essentially a partial exercise, still builds a massive back. And in fact, if you were to compare it to any other lift, or any of the things like, let's take any of these cable exercises that you see a lot of bodybuilders and people want to do. If you were to go take a couple of novices and you were to put one of them on nothing but lat pull downs and the other one on nothing but deadlifts on structured programs, and you get the deadlift really strong in the second one, his total back is probably going to be bigger than the guy who does lat pull downs. And I mean his total back. Their lats probably are going to be pretty similar. Like I've seen noobs who come in and don't do other back work, who just deadlift, build pretty respectable backs off of just the deadlift. Because I do know some power lifters who do that. I've known at least a couple who don't really do And this is contrary to what most powerlifters do. The vast majority would never do this, who don't do any other pulling. They don't do rows, they don't do pull-ups. I've known some who still have a decent back exclusively from hip hinge movements, mostly deadlifting and deadlift variations, who never do the other stuff. They do exist. So you see it out there, and the point he makes is that it is a partial. But it seems to be one of those partials where you get such an enormous amount of isometric training that is a larger, far, far larger of an isometric load than you're going to get with any other back exercise. You know, all these people, they want to squeeze and hold their back. Well, a deadlift does that with a hell of a lot more weight than you're ever going to do with a pull-up, a cable, a row, anything like that, as far as that squeezing the scapula together. In terms of an isometric contraction, it's going to be 4 times as much weight as you're going to be doing on most of those for that. And you have to maintain that coming off the floor to deadlift any respectable weight. So it has this enormous effect on the whole back, but even on the lats, which it doesn't move through a full range of motion. But it still seems to build the lats pretty effectively. And even EMG data shows that it lights the back, the lats themselves up just as effectively as any of these full range of motion exercises. So that's an interesting thing to note. So we kind of come back to that point. Range of motion usually matters. The majority of the time, it does have favorable benefits to hypertrophy. Not always, and the deadlift seems to be one of those cases. So we come over to the point that he makes about the bench press. Yeah, it does work most of the chest subduction. It's not quite the full thing, and you can get a little more. And an interesting point is that Jeff himself, in a lot of ways, really kind of proves the point, because Jeff does do some of these other movements, doesn't he? If you guys are objective, and I'm going to say even to the Jeff fangirls, be objective for a moment. Be objective, be realistic, and stop worshiping someone. Jeff is lagging in the chest department. I mean, if you guys are going to be picky about physiques, and I'm not a physique person, I think it's ridiculous. I don't care about it. I think it's the stupidest thing in the world. But anybody who's been around lifters their entire life, you're going to notice certain things. You can't help but notice them subconsciously. What's the first thing, if you're a serious lifter, then when you see Jeff, that you think of as far as something that stands out as a weakness? Without even thinking about it, it's subconscious. You're just going to notice immediately his lack of pecs. He doesn't have a chest. And if you're used to being around strong lifters, I'm used to being around power lifters, used to being at meets. That's the first thing I notice, is that this guy probably can't bench press shit. And it pops into my head just looking at him, because you can look at another lifter. If you're used to seeing lifters who are strong at different lifts and powerlifting meets, you can tell what lifts they're good at just when you see them. You can look at Jeff and be like, that guy can't bench press shit, because he has no chest. Got a bird chest, a little bitty, non-existent. Because if Jeff actually worked on his bench press more, he would have a bigger chest. So let's come over to that point. I'm not saying that someone with a lagging chest who wants a bigger chest and they've been working their bench, the majority of you guys are going to build a big chest just bench pressing. And he's right there. For maybe someone who it's a weak point, they could add some extra stuff in. But let's come over to the point. Working on that extra weak point training when you haven't built the base, this still doesn't work. If you haven't got strong at some of the basic exercises, you can do all the little weak point training in the world that you want, and it's not going to fix the problem. The majority of you guys out there, if you just get your pause bench and learn to bench correctly, where you get your scapula back, learn to pause on the chest instead of just bouncing it, you're not going to have a chest weakness. Get your bench up to 300 pounds. And everyone's, oh my God, I can't believe only a powerlifter do that. No, that's actually normal. A good training program is a perfectly reasonable lifetime goal for a drug-free, genetically average lifter to get a 300-pound bench. Totally reasonable on any good strength program. And anyone who disagrees has no experience running strength programs. You just don't. Because that's not, honestly, that's not an unobtainable or an unreasonable goal. Get your bench up to 300 pounds and you guys won't have that problem. And even that would apply to Jeff. Jeff's chest would be twice the size that it is right now if he just got his bench up to 300. It would actually resolve that issue. But will I go on to say that is he right that maybe someone who is having a lagging chest relative to everything else, could they benefit from some extra chest work that does work the other last bit of the range of motion? The bench press doesn't work that much. Yeah, they could. Of course they could. Totally reasonable. Totally reasonable. But Comes back to that point, working on your weak points when you haven't built the base yet won't work. It doesn't work. It can't work. It can't work. Because you've missed the majority of the development that you could have got from doing the big, basic, heavy exercise that would have built 80% of your size potential in that muscle already. You skipped that to focus on that last 20%, so all you get is the 20%. And that's the best way to look at it with some of these finishing movements and weak point training exercises, because that's essentially what a single joint or a smaller exercise is. It is not a primary builder. It's a weak point training exercise. That's what it is, and you have to understand it for what it is. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.